Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about restoring a Yankee. And this is the Yankee we're talking about. This is how it was found when we first saw it sitting at Moraine Air Park. It was sitting in the grass. Tires were probably low. Had a lot of defects. The canopy cover was coming off. There was a lot of birds' nest in the engine, as you will see. But when we looked on the inside, the panel looked really nice. It was fairly well set out. It had an HSI, it had an IFR GPS, it had two comms, it had, again, it was an IFR airplane. So stay tuned while we talk some more about this aircraft. Now, this airplane had originally been owned by John Maestre. He had bought it from a gentleman in Columbus, and here it is being flown with Ruth and Steve Williams, the editor of the AYA at the time. But anyway, he bought this airplane and he painted it, redid the interior with a custom interior, and redid the panel. And then when he passed away, the airplane was sold to a gentleman in Texas. It was brought down to Moraine Air Park because a gentleman in Texas was going to come get it. 6 years later, nothing had happened to it, and we stumbled across it because Luann and I had gone to a jewelry store and we had looked at what was going to be her engagement ring, and I wasn't impressed, but she was more impressed with getting an airplane for an engagement present than a ring, and that began the process of us getting Spanky. And as you can see, my Tiger was in the back with its engine being redone. So here's what the engine compartment looked like. It was pretty well filled with straw. Even a couple of egg casings, I think a dead bird we found in there, and it was on both sides, all down in the nose bolt, and you can see even a cigarette butt in there that they were using for nesting material. So anyway, we began the process of pulling out all the straw of the airplane, including the intake and everywhere we could reach up in there by taking the cowling off, and we filled a garbage bag with it, and then that got taken off to the burn pit, and that was taking care of that away. So now that we had all the bird straw out of there, then what we were thinking about was now the next step for cleaning it was going to be, well, the airplane was definitely going to require a good washing. Well, fortunately, the airplane was at Moraine Air Park, and the AYA has its typical spring clean. Here it is in 2006, and pulled it up to the wash rack, washed it all down, rinsed out all the bird straw, bird poop, everything like that, get a good scrub brush. And it was at that point when we began looking at the engine that we were deciding that probably not a whole lot of that engine going to be done, so we're going to need to find a new engine, and we're going to start the process of restoring it by redoing all the parts. So we remove the engine, and then we start looking at everything like the battery box and making sure it's got a drain in the bottom. The drain is all secure. Then we're going to take a look at the other bits of the airplane, like the battery box shield. We're going to prime it. We're going to paint it. We're going to check the insulation in it. We're going to make new cables for the whole thing, but as you get the idea that we're going to go through and do all of that. And there's the top for the battery box cover being shot in white Emerald, so it'll stand out nice and pretty in the engine compartment and be visible. The motor mount was taken down and made white. We got all new Lord mounts for the motor mount, and then we started on the rest of the accessories, and those were all done. Now that's the battery holder, and that's the exhaust stand, but they were all bead blasted down and repainted. And then we started looking at all the baffling seal material, and a lot of it we were not going to reuse. We were going to make new. We bought some pieces. We found some on eBay. Fletcher had a couple of pieces in old stock, and so the new engine was going to go on with new baffles and all new baffle seals, and the baffle seals came from Air Mods Northwest, and those templates are now owned by Yankee Aviation, who can now sell you sets of baffle seals for the aircraft. But anyway, here you go, and that's what the old baffles looked like when we were pulling them apart. Really nothing ecstatic about them. You can see that those are not all original. Some staples are there, but not all the way. Now, I gave you a little foreshadowing there with us redoing like the battery box and the battery box cover and the heat shield and all around the battery. But this is what it looked like when we pulled the cowling all the way off of it. Still the nose bowl and the toothpick Macaulay proper on there with the old style spinner arrangement on the tooth place. But anyway, this is what it looked like when we were beginning to remove the engine. And at this point, we knew that that engine wasn't going to work out real well for us, and we'll be showing you some pictures of why in just a moment. But the baffles were in bad shape. The scat tubing was all shot. The air filter was a joke because of the mice and the birds. But anyway, you kind of get an idea. Now, we were going to reuse the Olberg oil filter, as well as adding an oil cooler with a jumper set of hoses. A new exhaust was going to go on the airplane, and we had a Lycon port and polished J2A engine coming, and that's a 125 horsepower continuous Lycon port and polished engine. And looking down into the engine compartment, you're going to see the ignition harnesses are going to have to be redone. The battery cables are going to have to be redone. Everybody used zip ties. All the oil and fuel hoses are expired. One ground strap was in bad spot. As you can see right there, a motor mount is all yucked up. And so the new engine, what accessories you don't get with the new engine, we're going to have to redo it. Here we are missing on one of the cylinders, we're missing a primer. Complete. So that was one heck of an intake leak if that engine was going to be run. We also found some other issues with other leaks, places where heat was going to be a problem. The old starter was going to have to go. It was way too heavy. So again, here's just some shots of the engine as it stood on the airplane that's going to be removed. And this engine is going to serve as a core. It's not going to be used to be overhauled because we have a Lycon port and polished engine coming. It is a 125 horsepower continuous at 2800 RPM. It does require a central propeller, an oil cooler, and we had to get a carburetor that had an accelerator pump because it was required for that engine, so you don't have your engine die on takeoff by adding power. And we had to get a bigger Tiger strut for the nose bowl. Now, we paid a shop to do that for us, but they didn't install the new strut, and it was caught at the first annual that we performed on it at Yankee Aviation. And here we'll take a minute now that we've lifted the engine off of in the motor mount off of the airframe. We can turn it around, and now we can take good pictures of what the back of it looked like, how stiff the hoses were, where zip ties were used, where all the instrumentation went, what kind of condition the metal hoses were in, the intake tubes. Just take a good look at it. And this is when we knew we're going to have to get new motor mounts. We're going to probably have to redo the magnetos if they don't come with the new engine, as well as all the fuel and oil hoses, all the starter and battery cables, as well as some other bits and pieces on it. Now, all the ECI stuff was all checked out and all passed muster, so we didn't have to replace any of the ECI instrumentation that's in the airplane. But here's the old engine hanging on the hoist after we pulled it away, and we began taking the bits off. The carburetor was going to have to go off for overhaul. We're going to have to redo the exhaust brace. The exhaust is going to get checked. It's going to be rejected. We're going to take the firewall down, take what we can off of it. We're going to mask everything up, and then the firewall is going to get roll locked down to bare metal, and then we'll begin the process there. Once it's down, we're going to clean it 3 times, and then we're going to put acid etching primer on it. When the primer is cured, we're going to put a second coat of primer just to be on top, and then we're going to come back with aluminum silver paint to give us a nice bright shiny engine compartment. So, ongoing with the process of stripping the firewall, we're pulling the battery box off, the relays off, all the other bolt holes through. That's an Oberg oil filter coming off, and now we can get the roll lock in there, and we can really begin dancing away and taking it down to the bare aluminum that's back there and the sheet metal that's up at the top, the steel, and get it all down. Now, we're not going to pull out the carb heat because it was working fine. The gasket inside of it was fine. But again, we just took it all the way down, and then we cleaned it 3 times, and then 2 coats of acid etching primer on it just to make sure we had good coverage. Now the primer looked really good once we did the first coat. And we had everything all masked off. We had the area masked off, and for this process we had rented some space from Safe Flight FBO at Middletown to do all this work before we would fly it and put it in the hangar. But anyway, again, just 2 good coats of paint in a well ventilated hangar, and now we're ready for the old bits to start up with. So anyway, hope you're enjoying this so far. So now the old engine is living on an old tire sitting on the floor as we pull off what we might need to go on with the new engine as we begin the process of getting everything ready for the new engine hang. Again, the motor mount's going to be redone. The Lord mounts are going to get redone, and the exhaust brace there is going to get blasted down and then repainted. On the original Yankees with that long exhaust sticking out, this is a required part to the motor mounts to help hold that exhaust and not cause any problems with the whole exhaust system. And then after you saw that, now the paint can go on. The paint was shot on and allowed to cure, and then at that point we knew we were good to go, and it's time to start hanging the new engine. So there's the Leghorn port and polished engine, the motor mount redone, a couple of new battery cables, a new starter. We're reusing the ring gear. Here's it looking at the other side. The battery box is hanging there now. We've bolted everything back up to the firewall. The relays are all in place. So we're getting really close to having an airplane. There's the empty pallet the engine came on. So we're getting really happy about this. Now, because of that J2A engine, we needed a sentient propeller, which means we needed a different spinner. And there we go. We were able to find one and have that done. It was eventually painted Ferrari red to match the rest of the airplane. And then here we are starting to button it back up. You can see the baffle and the baffle seals are all in there, and it's starting to look like a real airplane. As we were doing all that, we rebuilt the yoke system, we trimmed it, we did all the rigging on it, and we performed a good annual on it. And when we had it back in the air, it was about that time that we could park it out on the line of the up at Middletown by our hangar, and there we are displaying it for people to see. The new owner, Tim Horniak, who has Spanky now, once he got it, he redid the interior with a custom leather, including the side panels. He redid all the glass in the aircraft, and she is one nice looking airplane. So ladies and gentlemen, we hope you found all this useful and informative. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day flying and restoring your airplane.